Hey folks, hope everyone's doing well. Today, the question was about creating and pitching ideas and how I've gone about it in the past. It's actually a really broad topic because it's different based on the environment that you're in and who you need to pitch the game to, like who your audience is. For example, if it's totally different if you're an indie versus if you're working at a big publisher. And even then, the type of publisher that you're at, the type of people that you're pitching to are different. So the way that you go about developing an idea and pitching it varies based on that environment. But I figured I'd give you a couple of examples of how I've pitched ideas that I've pitched and where I pitched them to give you sort of an idea of how I approached it. So at Blizzard, I pitched an idea for this thing called Event Realms. It was related to World of Warcraft. It was very similar to what Season's Journey or Classic is today. The whole goal of that was to leverage the abundance of assets that we had with regards to all of the different content that World of Warcraft had and all the nostalgia that it had, along with the problem of wanting to bring players back into the World of Warcraft environment. We had always seen a lot of churn, which is totally natural for a game. It's not like, World of Warcraft is suffering, but there always was this desire to, how can we give players who may have lapsed a reason to come back and then something that would be sticky? And nostalgia was always a big deal. So in that situation, I came up with an idea that solved both of those problems. Event Realms were EverQuest has done them in the past, so it wasn't like it was a brand new idea. The process there was a little lighter than what I have done at other companies. It wasn't a lot of like big pitch decks or anything like that. It was much simpler. It was really just, hey, here's the idea. Let's chase it for a bit and see where it goes. The other idea that I pitched, I have some notes here because it's actually a pretty big topic. At Phoenix Labs, I pitched an idea called Project Griffin. The purpose of this is the company was at a situation where we were scaling and we wanted games that were all live service. Social was a big deal at the time, and big games were fine. We really wanted to chase the idea of, can we make these big games that have a big impact on the industry, that really set the tone, that are social and that are going to live forever? Everything had to be live service. That was just what everyone was chasing at the time. So the idea that I pitched was revolved around that, but it also combined a solution for a problem that I'd seen for the audience. In this case, I believe that big 10,000 player servers in MMOs, they're not really what makes a game social. What makes a game social is the idea of spending time with your friends, solving problems together, like playing a game and like beating bosses and collecting loot and doing all this in an environment where you want to spend time together. So that's where the idea came from. It was much more smaller servers, but still massive scale. It was a fantasy style thing because we didn't have any other fantasy games on flight at the time. We wanted it to have combat that was relatable. Combat was a big deal, like making sure that it was actiony yet still something that worked. And the hook for it, I suppose, was this idea of solving the end game problem. In MMOs, you end up in this content treadmill challenge where the players get to the end, they always want more content, and players can consume the content faster than the developer can make it. So the idea here was that almost like Rogue Legacy, you guys have played that game, but you would play through a season, and at the end of the season, the server would wipe, but it would actually just advance time in some way, shape, or form. And the actions that you had taken through that season would be remembered by the NPCs in the next season. Imagine your character is immortal and you're going through and each season pushes time forward. Your character starts from scratch again. then the NPCs that they meet in the next season, they all have some previous relationship with. This was combined with much smaller server limits. So at a server, say 100 players at most, and the idea kind of like with Valheim, where players can spin up their own personal servers at a cost or something along those lines, then they can craft and build their own little worlds that are completely unique and different. Some of this was leveraging the Nemesis system, which was going to be a challenge. But so here there was a pretty substantial pitch deck, and there was a lot of analysis done into what the target audience would be, how big is that audience potential, like how many players are there in total. There was analysis of what adjacent games are trying to do this, what are the challenges, what are the first steps. There was a big pitch deck that was put together for this. I'll link it in the description here when I get permission by Google to actually add links to my descriptions. The next idea that I wanted to share was at Netflix. It was kind of the same, but a little bit different. When I was at Netflix, I was pitching an idea. I'm not going to share what the idea is. That's going too deep into NDA type stuff. But the idea that I was pitching was intentionally very aligned to the strategic goals of the company that I was working for at the time. All companies have strategic goals that they want to accomplish. These are big visiony type things that are set and shared out to the rest of the company that are meant to align all of the different teams and all the different work efforts towards accomplishing that goal. And the Netflix game studio had a set of strategic goals that they wanted to achieve. There was also a few internal product initiatives that were being chased that clearly had a lot of backing that not many people were also, chasing at the same time. So I decided to craft a game idea that hit all of those goals. And that was exactly what I was doing. Like the whole point of that game idea was to make sure that every idea or concept within that game concept all lined up with those strategic goals. And it was kind of political, but that was just how I chose to approach the solution to that problem. It was a game that I was excited to work on, don't get me wrong. There was a lot of potential there. That was a great IP. The people who were working on that IP were fantastic, but there wasn't enough general overhead money at the company at the time to funding to support spinning up another project, especially at Netflix. So those are all ideas that I've pitched at big companies. If I was to come up with an idea that was much more indie, like if it was just an idea that I wanted to do on my own, the approach would be a little bit different. How I would approach it would be, I would try and match my own personal interests with something that solved the problem for an audience. I'd be looking at an area of gameplay that wasn't being served. I would look at, games that had been abandoned that had a lot of interest in them when they first came out. There's a game called Until We Die, which is a Kingdoms type game, Kingdoms Two Crowns type game that had a lot of interest, but the developers were from the Ukraine, and unfortunately, I don't think that they were able to continue working on it. But when it first came out, it has like 20,000 people who played the demo, and they all have like various positive reviews beyond hey, it died. So I'd be looking to match my personal, like, what am I interested in? If I was to make something and spin it up and spend every day working on something, what would give me energy? What would I be excited to build and then play? And then on top of that, something that solved a problem for the player. You got to remember, games aren't just entertainment. I mean, they are first and foremost. I guess I just kind of like double backed on myself. But games also solve a problem for players. And by problem, I mean they don't have access to a game that does that today. This is why making a first-person shooter like Call of Duty is a bad idea for any indie. There just is a game out there that is a great Call of Duty. Now, BattleBit is an exception because they solved a problem for the audience in that the Battlefield developers weren't giving the Battlefield players what it is they wanted. The Battlefield players, it was really clear what they wanted. They wanted class gameplay, they wanted big battles, they wanted destruction, and nowhere in the forums or on the Reddit posts or anything were Battlefield players screaming about higher fidelity or better visuals. They were all saying that they wanted really great gunplay. And I mean, just watch Jack Frags talk about what he wants. And that's a perfect example of you can make a game that serves his need. He has that problem. He doesn't have a game out there right now that is solving the problem, is serving that itch, that is entertaining him in that way. So that's what I would be doing if I was spinning up an indie game right now. I'd be looking at the environment. I'd be listening to the people who are complaining about existing games within the types of games that I'd be interested in making, and then trying to figure out how I could solve that problem for them, how I could serve that audience, how I could give them what they wanted. At that moment, if I was indie, I would avoid the pitch deck. I'd probably put together like a one-pager that was, here's the problem, here's the vision, here's the fantasy, but very high level. And then I would start building as fast as humanly possible. That is how I would approach it. But I have a lot of experience and confidence in my ability to get up and start prototyping. I would also avoid doing, Jonas has a great video, by the way, about how to prototype, which I highly recommend. But yeah, that's how I would kind of approach, or how I have approached coming up with different ideas. And again, just to loop back to the beginning, a lot of it comes down to the environment that you're in. The type of idea that you pitch needs to suit the environment, the audience that you're pitching for. So I hope this was valuable. I hope you found this interesting. And thanks for watching. I look forward to chatting with you again tomorrow.